Okay, so for step 22, attaching the front wheels, we need to grab our bearings and attach them to the chassis. It pretty much is as simple as that. However, I want you to do a full stop here and do not do this yet. If you remember, back in step 19, they wanted you to attach the steering arms, and I said I wouldn't do that because I want to wait until the step where they talk about adjusting it before you do that. Well, I thought it was coming up quicker than that, but 22 is showing you putting the front wheels on. 23 is showing you putting the rear wheels on. Then 24, install the battery pack. And for some reason, step 25 is where they're telling you to make the adjustments. Notice there's no tires on this for making the adjustments. So why they're telling you in step 22 to put them on when you haven't even adjusted the steering, I have no idea. So let me just say this. When you get to 22, skip right over 22 and go to 25, because we need to make sure that these are in the correct position before we put the tires on. I don't see any other reason why you would do that. I would rather do this step without the tires on than with. So let's move to step 25 instead of 22. So for step 25, the steering adjustments, they want you to have those uprights with a slight toe in. And they're showing that not only can you adjust the rods themselves, but you can adjust the servo position. And if you remember, there were basically oval holes that allowed you to screw this down in whatever position was needed. So I could move it left or right, and I chose to put it in more or less in the center. So if you look at the car, I've placed these ball connectors on top of the balls, but I haven't snapped them into place. But as you can see, the toe in that they were showing here, where they want the toe in to be a little bit on either side, you can see that on this side there's a bit of toe in, and on this side it's more or less straight out. There is a bit of toe in, but not that much. So what I'm going to do, and I can tell that everything's going to be okay, is that using your steering trim, you're going to be able to adjust this after the fact, because with the steering trim, you're going to be able to move the servo a little bit. And honestly, from what I can see, this has a little bit, I don't know if you can see it there, this has a fair bit more, but if I was to use the steering trim and move the servo that way, right, that way, you'll be able to have a little bit more toe in there and a little less toe in on this side, and it'll be fine. So it's just going to be a matter of using the trim. So I'm not worried about this because we measured these rods exactly. Like, I spent time showing you how detailed, well, I kind of am a checker. I like to make sure it's exactly where it needs to be. So we did all that. So technically this should be okay. So in terms of the measuring, as long as that's been done properly, you really should only have to use the trim to do any fine tuning. And from what I can see here, that's all we're going to need to do in this step. So I am comfortable with snapping these ball connectors onto the balls themselves, because I'll be able to do the final trimming afterwards. So we can go back to step 22 and we'll attach those front wheels. So in coming back to step 22 now, we've got our bearings and we've got our lock nuts. So we're going to put the bearings into the wheels. There's one and there's two. So they are now in. You are going to see now that they want you to grease the shaft and then attach the wheel with the lock nut. Well, because we are using bearings and not the plastic bushings, I am not going to be putting grease on there. It's just a quirk I have. I do not like doing that because I just feel that it gums up the bearings. So I'm going to put that on there. Grab our lock nut. Grab our box wrench. And we're going to get this wheel on. And there we go. So there is one of our wheels. So now we're going to do the same thing with the other side. I've already popped the bearings in. So we'll just put that wheel on, grab our lock nut, screw that in. And there we go. And so now we have our other wheel in place. So there we have our front wheels. So step 22 is done. So now we're going to move on to step 23, which is attaching the rear wheels.